They said she was just this supply girl, tucked away in the back of camp where the action never seemed to reach, a quiet figure surrounded by crates and clipboards, numbers and rations. That's how most people thought of her, until one order, spoken in the heat of a restless afternoon, changed everything. Ridge Ember moved to staging. For words, sharp as a strike of lightning, and her life would never be the same. If you agree that every soldier's role, no matter how hidden, deserves respect, make sure to like and subscribe, because what you're about to hear is the kind of story that reminds us courage doesn't always come with medals on a chest. Sometimes it comes in the silence of responsibility until destiny calls it forward. Ridge Ember was in her late 20s then, not new to the army but not yet weathered with decades either. Caught in that strange place between youthful determination and the kind of bone-deep fatigue you only learn from nights spent under the weight of responsibility. Her mornings always started the same way. The hum of generators in the distance, the grit of dust settling into every crease of her uniform, the endless columns of numbers she would scrawl on manifests while her hands smelled faintly of cardboard and plastic. She kept track of everything. Boxes of MRE stacked like bricks of survival, water jugs that meant the difference between life and collapse, spare boots, helmets, even the small luxuries soldiers clung to when deployment stretched longer than the heart could measure. To many, her work seemed invisible, but she knew better. She knew that every frontline push, every patrol, every mission leaning on razor-thin margins was only possible because supply held steady in the background. Still, she had grown used to the silence, to being overlooked, and sometimes that invisibility hurt more than she admitted. She remembered once overhearing a passing grunt joke. "If you're not carrying a rifle, you're just cargo." She'd said nothing, but the words burned like an ember under her ribs. That day, she thought it would be no different, just another stretch of hours bent over inventory sheets, lips moving quietly as she counted aloud. 36, 37, 38. Outside, the air shimmered with heat, and voices carried faintly from the motor pool. She was halfway through a stack of boxes when the sergeant's shadow fell across her. She looked up, a pencil still tucked behind her ear, expecting a request for updated numbers or a report to be rushed out. Instead, the sergeant's voice was clipped, commanding, urgent. Ridge Ember moved to staging. At first, she thought she misheard him. Staging? That wasn't her place. Supply had boundaries, unspoken walls that separated the ones who counted from the ones who acted. But his eyes didn't waver. He repeated himself, slower this time, deliberate. Move. 2. Staging. The pencil slipped from behind her ear and clattered to the concrete floor. Her first instinct was confusion, the second was hesitation, and the third, the one that mattered most, was a decision she didn't fully understand yet, but felt rising in her chest anyway. She nodded. No questions, no excuses, just a nod, and then she wiped her hands on her cargo pants and followed. It wasn't the march of someone who had been waiting for this moment all her life. It was the walk of someone who realized life doesn't always wait for you to feel ready. As she stepped out of the supply room and into the wider open yard of the base, she felt eyes on her, curious glances from soldiers already gearing up for staging, men and women who belonged to that world of preparation and forward movement. She wasn't sure if they expected her to falter, to turn back, but she didn't. Something inside her told her she couldn't. That moment, brief as it was, cracked open something she had kept locked away. Because for all her quiet work behind crates and clipboards, for all the nights she whispered doubts into the darkness of her cot, Ridge Ember hadn't forgotten why she enlisted. It wasn't for praise, it wasn't for recognition, and it wasn't for comfort. It was for this. The chance to stand shoulder to shoulder with those who carried the weight of uncertainty and keep moving forward anyway. She didn't know yet what was waiting for her at staging, but she knew it mattered. She felt it in the sudden sharpness of her breath, the way her heart thudded not in fear, but in anticipation. Behind her, the stacks of MREs still stood, neat, orderly, untouched for the moment. But ahead of her, something far less certain waited, and in that uncertainty was the very heart of what it meant to serve. For Ridge Ember, late 20s, soldier of supply, this was the moment she crossed a line she didn't even know had been drawn for her, the moment when the background faded and her own story began. And though the air around her was just another dusty afternoon, though no one marked it in history books, though no trumpet sounded or banner waved. Those 4 words had set something into motion she would carry for the rest of her life. Ridge Ember. Moved to staging. She didn't realize how different staging would feel until she stepped onto that cracked stretch of pavement where trucks idled and soldiers moved with a rhythm that seemed rehearsed, like gears inside a machine larger than any one person. The heat pressed down harder here, mixed with the metallic tang of diesel, the clank of gear being thrown into place, the hurried voices barking orders and responses. Ridge Ember, late 20s, more used to tallying rows of boxes than standing among squads with rifles slung and helmets strapped, felt the weight of 100 unspoken questions pressing against her skin. She caught a glance from one soldier tightening straps on a pack, the kind of glance that measured and dismissed all at once. What's supply doing here? For a moment, her pulse tripped over itself, the urge rising to step back, to explain, to say she belonged in the quiet shadows of inventory, not out here where the stakes looked so sharp, so visible. But she remembered the sergeant's eyes, the tone of his voice, and she pushed the doubt down, where it joined the ember already glowing in her chest. She kept moving. A truck door slammed somewhere behind her, a radio crackled, and she felt her own hands tighten against her thighs as if bracing herself against the current of energy in the air. A clipboard was shoved into her hands before she could even ask why she'd been pulled from counting rations. The sergeant didn't give her time for questions. "You'll help with load coordination," he said simply. Already moving past her, his words clipped with urgency. She stared down at the papers, numbers and codes scrawled in hurried strokes that looked nothing like the neat columns she usually kept. This wasn't order, it was chaos disguised in ink, and she was expected to make sense of it in real time. Her throat tightened. This wasn't the safe silence of supply. This was moving, living pressure, where mistakes didn't just mean a late shipment. They meant someone might not have what they needed out there. She swallowed hard, lifted her chin, and started to read. Around her, staging was a storm. Soldiers strapping down crates, vehicles being fueled, gear checked and rechecked, voices rising and cutting across each other. Ridge Ember's job here was to be the calm in the storm, the one who made sure nothing was overlooked, nothing left behind. She began cross-checking the manifest with the stacks lined along the ground, her eyes darting quickly, her lips whispering numbers like prayers. 1, 2, 3, 4. Her finger ran across the labels, her mind racing. She was fast, precise, and in those first frantic minutes, her nerves began to shift into something sharper, steadier. But inside, she fought the doubt whispering that she was out of her depth, that one slip would expose her as an imposter in a world she wasn't meant to stand in. A soldier brushing past muttered, "Watch it, supply," and the word hit her like a stone. Supply, as if it were a lesser calling, as if the quiet labor she gave every day wasn't the backbone beneath this very chaos. She clenched her jaw, held tighter to the clipboard, and kept working. A drop of sweat rolled down her temple, and she'd barely noticed. Her eyes caught something wrong. One line didn't match the stack in front of her. The manifest said 12 crates of medical packs, but the staging area only had 11. Her chest constricted. A single missing crate wasn't just a clerical error. It could mean a squad running short in the field, lives hanging on supplies that weren't there. She spun, searching for it, her heart pounding louder with every second. Around her, the storm didn't slow. Soldiers moved, trucks rumbled, someone shouted her name, and she barely heard it. Her eyes locked onto a half-loaded truck at the far edge of staging, where a soldier was about to chain down cargo. She sprinted, no hesitation, her boots pounding the pavement, clipboard tight in her grip. "Stop! That crate! Check that manifest!" she yelled, louder than she thought she could. The soldier froze, startled, then looked. Ridge Ember shoved her clipboard forward, fingers stabbing at the mismatched line. For a tense moment, the air felt like it held its breath. The sergeant turned, his gaze sharp, measuring, then flicked toward the crate she had pointed out. And there it was, the 12th, half buried behind other supplies, about to be strapped into the wrong load. If it had left, it would have been sent off course entirely. The sergeant's jaw tightened, then his eyes locked on hers, not dismissive this time, but heavy, assessing. He gave a sharp nod, and with a gesture, redirected the load. The crate was pulled, reassigned, secured where it belonged. The moment passed in seconds, but Ridge Ember felt it in her bones. She had stepped into staging as an outsider, but now she had caught what others missed, saved the mission from unraveling in ways no one would want to imagine. Around her, the storm continued, but something shifted. No one said it out loud, but the glance she caught from the same soldier who had dismissed her earlier was different this time. Not full of respect yet, but no longer disbelief either. She exhaled slowly, gripping the clipboard tighter, her heart pounding less with fear now and more with a strange, steady fire. She wasn't invisible anymore. She had been tested, sudden, unexpected, unforgiving, and she had not broken. She had risen. The air inside staging had shifted. Ridge Ember could feel it. Not in words, not in open acknowledgement, but in the way the storm of preparation seemed to part just slightly to let her stand within it. No longer an outsider, but a necessary part of the machine. The clipboard in her hands wasn't just paper and ink anymore. It was responsibility, pulsing with the weight of real consequence. She knew that the 12th crate she had salvaged wasn't just supplies. It was proof, to herself, to everyone watching, that her presence here mattered. Yet the day wasn't done, not by a long shot. The sergeant moved closer, his face lined from years of strain, his eyes still sharp as a blade. "You caught that mistake. Good. Now keep sharp. Things are moving fast, and fast means dangerous." It was the closest thing to praise she had ever heard from him, and it landed with more force than she expected. She nodded once, steady, and turned back to her work. Trucks began to rumble into line, engines low and restless like beasts straining against reins. Soldiers double-checked straps, communications barked through radios, the urgency pressing tighter as the clock wound down toward deployment. And then, just as the convoy was on the brink of rolling out, it happened. A ripple of panic, small at first, but spreading like a crack through glass. A supply discrepancy had surfaced again, this time in the ammunition loads. A mislabel threatened to send half the rounds to the wrong squad, leaving another dangerously understocked. The air thickened with the kind of silence that only follows a mistake too costly to ignore. Eyes darted, voices rose, frustration crackled like static. Ridge Ember felt her throat go dry, but she didn't freeze. She stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tangle of shouts. "Give me the manifest." Now. The soldier holding it blinked, startled at her authority, but handed it over. She scanned the pages, eyes flicking from code to crate, her mind racing in rhythm with her pulse. Something wasn't adding up. She dropped the clipboard, crouched by the nearest stack, and began ripping open the markings with her bare hands, not caring that dust caked under her nails. That cardboard scraped her skin. The others watched, some doubtful, some impatient. She didn't notice them. She only noticed the numbers, the letters, the subtle shifts in how certain crates were stenciled. And then she saw it. The error wasn't in the paperwork at all, it was in the stacking. Two identical codes had been transposed in the rush, and unless it was caught, the wrong ammunition would be rolling out within minutes. Her chest tightened with both dread and resolve. She stood, shouting toward the sergeant. "These two swapped them. Now, they've been misstacked. If they leave like this, one squad goes light." For a beat, no one moved. The moment stretched thin, heavy, suffocating. And then the sergeant barked an order, and the soldiers obeyed, prying the crates loose, hauling them into their proper places, the thunder of urgency fueling every movement. Ridge Ember's hands shook, but not from fear anymore. From the sheer surge of adrenaline that comes when you stand at the edge of collapse and pull the whole weight back from falling. When the final crate locked into its rightful slot, when the convoy roared to life with the right supplies secured, the tension broke like a snapped wire. The sergeant turned, eyes locked on hers, and though his mouth barely moved, his words carried enough weight to last a lifetime. "You just saved lives today. Don't forget that." For Ridge Ember, the world narrowed in that moment. She wasn't just the supply girl anymore. She wasn't invisible, faceless, overlooked. She was a soldier who had risen when it mattered most, when the easy choice would have been to stay silent, to stay small. She stood straighter, the dust on her uniform no longer a mark of monotony, but of belonging. The convoy rolled out, engines fading into the distance, and Ridge Ember stood at the edge of staging. Clipboard still in her hands, her heart pounding with a rhythm that felt new, unfamiliar. but right. She knew she would return to the supply room, to the rows of boxes and the steady count of rations. But something inside her had changed forever. Because courage isn't always about the battlefield. Sometimes it's about stepping out of the shadows you've grown used to and proving, to yourself and everyone else, that you were meant to stand in the light. And though her name would never be printed in headlines, though the moment would never be etched in history books, Ridge Ember would carry it with her always. The day she was called forward, the day she chose to rise, the day the sergeant's words marked her not as invisible, but indispensable. Sometimes it takes just 4 words to shift the entire course of a life. Ridge Ember moved to staging.